From Triple E Media, I'm Rahmat Muhammad, and this is The Backstory.
Lisa, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36.
As you know, our National Assembly has two chambers, a House of Representatives and a Senate. And each of these chambers can form a committee to address certain big topics. The House of Representatives formed a committee of the whole earlier this year to review our Electoral Act, and about 3 weeks ago, on Thursday, July 15th, the committee held a meeting, a plenary session, to vote on amendments to the Electoral Act.
The last time our Electoral Act was amended was in 2010. But a lot has happened in our country's journey towards democracy and the development of technology since 2010. So it's a good time to amend the Act.
43, 44, 45.
So the members of the committee begin to march through each clause one by one. There are 158 clauses and they recommend and vote on amendments.
At the head of the committee is the chairman, Honorable Idris Wasi, who is presiding over the proceedings. Now things seem to be going along as normal until they arrive at clause 52 subsection 2.
In the initial 2010 Act, section 52 subsection 2 reads, "The use of electronic voting machines for the time being is prohibited." The proposed amendment will give INEC, that's the Independent National Electoral Commission, the power to determine the voting procedure. So the proposal doesn't explicitly empower electronic voting, but it also no longer prohibits it. It leaves it up to INEC to determine.
All voting in Nigeria was and is still done by the analog method, paper ballots.
The only parts of the voting process that are electronic are the voter accreditation and the verification processes. Voting itself, the counting of the ballots and the transmission of the counts are all done using paper and human beings.
So on that day, the 15th of July, members of the Committee of the Whole get to section 52 subsection 2. One member gets up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues. I rise to make amendment on section 52.2. 522.
He's about to move for an amendment to section 52 subsection 2.
The amendment goes, voting shall be conducted by card reader, while transmission of results shall be done manually and in hard copy.
And he motions that voting should be done electronically, but the transmission of results should continue to be done manually by paper. As he sits down, you hear a chorus of no's.
So then, the chairman calls for someone to second the proposal. That's how it works in these plenary sessions. Someone makes a proposal, another person seconds it, and then they vote by saying either aye or nay. The chairman calls for someone to second the proposal, and another committee member gets up. But he doesn't seem to understand what the initial motion was, so he is asked by the other members to sit down.
Now, amidst the confusion, which the chairman is finding amusing, you can actually hear him chuckling off camera. Amidst this confusion, he starts to move on to clause 53.
Well, 53.
52 amendment.
Yes.
Amendment.
And he is met with an uproar of no's. The members want him to stay on section 52 subsection 2. Other members want to make motions to amend the section.
Honorable Toby Okechukwu from Enugu State stands up and motions for a different amendment to section 52 subsection 2.
My amendment is to the effect that transmission of results under this bill, under the election, shall be by electronic transmission. I so move.
Honorable Okechukwu wants transmission of results to be done electronically. The chamber starts to get restless and the chairman tries to call them to order, but then he makes this comment.
And I want to believe that today in Nigeria, I don't know the coverage.
of the broadband, have we been able to cover all parts of the federation that will now want to put it? I don't know.
He goes on to say that his own constituency only has 20% broadband coverage and that their votes will be disenfranchised if this amendment goes through.
Now, we don't know if what the chairman said is true or not, but his comment at that moment revealed his concern and also his bias. And this is important to note because of what happens next.
The motion to allow for the electronic transmission of election results is seconded. Then the chairman calls for a vote.
Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Against say nay. The bless have it.
Now, in these plenary sessions, votes are by voice. The chairman estimates the count based on the volume of the ayes and nays. And in this case, it was hard, even for us listening with headphones, to distinguish between the volume of the ayes and the nays. But the chairman rules the nays have it and bangs the gavel.
And that's when hell broke loose. Some committee members stand up in celebration, others stand up in opposition. In less than a minute, nearly every member in the entire chamber was on their feet, engaging in a shouting match with each other.
The ruckus goes on for at least 15 minutes before the committee resumes. When the committee comes back to order, another member moves for an amendment to Section 52, subsection 2. The motion would allow for both manual and electronic transmission of vote results, which, in theory, could be a win-win for everyone. Those states that can do electronic voting would do that, and those states that can only do manual would do that.
The motion is seconded, and again the committee chairman puts it to a vote. Once again, he rules that the nays have it.
More uproar, and this time there is no bringing the session back to order. The committee adjourns until the next day.
I remember the first time I voted. It was in the 2019 general elections, and I voted in Kaduna State. I didn't really know what to expect, outside of the usual stories that are told of how it takes forever to vote. My polling unit was a 3-minute walk from my house. So I get there at about 8 in the morning, and I take my place in the line. Around that time, there were maybe 30 people ahead of me. After about an hour, the line had barely moved. Apparently, there was an issue with the smart card reader.
In the 2015 general election, Nigeria introduced the PVC, the Permanent Voters Card, and a smart card reader. The PVC looks like a driver's license, except that it has a microchip which contains the holder's information such as name, date of birth, address, height, and fingerprint scan. The smart card reader is a handheld device. It looks like a POS. And it's used to read a microchip on the PVC in order to authenticate it. The smart card reader also has a fingerprint scanner used to make sure that the person who is holding the card and about to vote is authorized to vote at that particular polling unit.
I eventually make it to the front of the line, where I'm met by a man holding a smart card reader. I give him my PVC and he scans it with the device. He presses a couple of buttons and asks me to press my thumbprint on the reader, and then a minute later he hands back my PVC. Once the machine confirmed that I was authorized to vote at that polling unit, I was handed 3 ballot papers. 1 for the seat of president, 1 for senator, and 1 for House of Representatives.
During the 2019 general elections, Nigeria had 73 political parties that were recognized by INEC and allowed to be on the presidential ballot. And the way the ballots were designed, the names and the pictures of the candidates do not actually appear on the ballot. Instead, only the logos and acronyms of the parties are printed on the ballot.
So I was given my ballot papers. They were these long papers, probably about 15 inches long and maybe 6 inches wide. Now, the presidential ballot had to fit 73 political parties on there and still give space to put your thumbprint next to your selection, so it was a huge piece of paper. Anyway, I take my ballots and I'm directed to a makeshift cubicle. The cubicle was simply 2 plastic sheets set on the wooden slab that served as a table. The sheets were on the left and the right, so no one standing next to me could see what I was doing unless they were standing in the cubicle with me, so I had some level of privacy. Once in the cubicle, I dipped my thumb into the ink pad and pressed my thumbprint next to the logo of my chosen candidate's party. I did that for all 3 ballot papers, and then I folded the ballot papers and stuffed each into the designated box. Each box was clearly marked with either the words presidential, senatorial, or House of Representatives, and the boxes were these large, clear plastic storage containers that basically looked like Tupperware with a thin, rectangular opening on the top, kind of like a slot. It was sometime around 1 p.m. when I finally left the polling center, so it took about 5 hours to vote. Other than the wait time on the line, it was pretty straightforward.
The voting step in an election process, the part where the people put their ink fingerprint to paper to cast their vote, is actually designed to be straightforward and difficult to tamper with. The issues with vote tampering usually happen before the person arrives to vote at the polling center or after the vote has been cast.
Before a person enters the polling unit, vote buying can happen. Vote buying is when a political party offers people bribes either in the form of money or other gifts to vote for a specific candidate. This practice was especially rampant before PVCs, but now we have the PVCs and there are public enlightenment campaigns to discourage people from selling their votes. So vote buying is less and less these days, but politicians can of course still influence votes by making promises they cannot keep, but soon they won't be able to outrightly buy voters and votes.
Since it's getting harder and harder to tamper with votes before people go into the polling unit, the other option is to tamper with the votes that come out of the polling unit. Ballot box stuffing, where ballots are added to ballot boxes, and ballot box snatching, where ballot boxes are snatched and destroyed, are 2 popular ways of tampering with votes after they have been cast.
Votes can also be tampered with at the stage when ballots are being counted, but the likelihood of tampering at this stage is low because of the number of parties involved in monitoring the count. Usually, there's a member of INEC and representatives from each of the major political parties that are involved in monitoring the count.
Now, after votes are counted at each of the polling units, the counts are then written down by hand on a result sheet. The result sheet from each polling unit, and there are over 175,000 polling units in Nigeria. So, each polling unit transmits its result sheet to the ward level for collation. There are more levels of collation depending on the type of election.
For a presidential election, after the result sheets leave the polling units, there's collation that happens at the ward level, the local government level, the state level, and then finally collation by the INEC chairman at the federal level. So basically 4 levels of collation.
But this collation process is like the game of telephone. There's a risk that at each point or node of transmission, the message could be changed. A report by the International Republic Institute found that collation and transmission were the weakest part of our election process in the 2015 general elections.
Which brings us back to the debate that caused an uproar in the National Assembly a few weeks ago. On the 16th of July, the day after the Committee of the Whole adjourned, they resumed. That day, Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, Speaker of the House of Representatives and also a member of the Committee of the Whole, opened the session. Before they adjourned the last time, they had decided that they would invite the NCC, that's the National Communications Commission, to the session. NCC regulates all telecommunications in Nigeria. NCC is asked to address 2 critical questions.
How much of the country has broadband network coverage?
And is there any possibility of hacking?
The NCC representative reveals that in 2018, they conducted network coverage studies of the polling units in the country.
We plotted 2G coverage, 3G coverage, and LTE coverage. And we were able to see that about half of the polling units were covered with 2G/3G services. That is both 2G and 3G services. Roughly about 50.3% of those. Then about 49.7% did not have any coverage at all. or had only 2G?
As of 2018, about 50%, that's half of our polling units, have 3G network coverage. The rest have only 2G coverage, and less than 1% have no coverage at all.
So, the next obvious question is,
for the purpose of transmission of votes, when you say 2G, when you say 3G, can this exercise be done by 2G?
This is a hot potato question, and an NCC technical representative tries his best to bypass it.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. I wish INEC were here to actually take this question, because I will be venturing out to say things perhaps that are not really under the mandate of NCC.
But then he gives a response.
From a personal standpoint, from what I could tell of what is required, it's only 3G that could give that kind of cover. That could give that kind of transmission in full.
Now, on the question of hacking.
The question is whether it is possible to hack this. I'm sure it's open knowledge to all here that there is no system that is safe from hacking. You can do your best to secure it, but no system is 100% hack-free. Every day you read about hackers breaking into banks, insurance companies, travel industry, and all sorts of industries. So hacking is a possibility always.
After the NCC representatives take their leave, members of the Committee of the Whole continue their deliberation.
To cut a long story short, after the deliberations,
we have passed the electoral amendment. We have the controversial section 52. For clarity, we have left it as provided by the committee as it came, which is to allow INEC to determine whatever they want to do. But I believe that
the committee's final recommendation is for Section 52, subsection 2 to be amended to allow INEC to determine the procedure they want to use for elections and transmission of results.
But then the Senate, which was also debating and voting on the amendments at the same time, they make one additional tweak.
The Commission may consider electronic transmission of results provided the national coverage is adjudged to be adequate and secure by the National Communication Commission (NCC) and approved by the National Assembly.
The amendment makes NCC and the National Assembly partners in INEC's ultimate decision about whether or not to proceed with electronic transmission of election results.
This means that INEC needs sign-off from NCC and the National Assembly before they can transmit election results electronically.
And for some people, this amendment should not have passed because they believe it compromises INEC's independence. But that's a story for another day.
So, are we ever going to see electronic transmission of election results in Nigeria anytime soon? I guess it depends.
First, the president has to sign the bill to amend the act into law. There has been at least one amendment to this act since 2015, and the president did not sign it into law.
Then it depends on a technology that can ensure coverage in every part of the country and maximum fidelity in data transfer. But I think in the end, we may end up having both the electronic and manual processes running simultaneously for some time. And actually, other countries do this, like Finland.
In Finland, results are transferred electronically from polling places so that they can get same-day results. But the official results are based on the original paper ballots, which obviously take a bit more time to review.
And in Finland, they also archive the original paper for several years until the next election result is confirmed. So if there's a need to do a recount, they can rely on the paper ballots.
But Finland has had about 3 million voters in every election since 1999, so 3 million ballots to count.
Here in Nigeria, we have had somewhere between 25 to 30 million voters in every election since 1999. So 10 times as many ballots to count. And if you assume about 20% of our population will vote at any given time, then we'll have 80 million ballots by 2050.
And if we keep voting and transmitting results by paper, we'll all soon be working for INEC. So we do need to find a solution not just to improve the security of our current election process, but also to become more efficient at processing more ballots in the future. If we are serious about making democracy work, we need to make sure that everyone's vote counts.
62! 62! 62! Thank you, that's very good cooperation. 63! 63!
The Backstory is brought to you by EE Media Productions. Production copyright 2021 EE Media Productions. If you enjoyed this episode of The Backstory and want to hear more, subscribe to our 234 Audio YouTube channel. Episodes of this podcast and our other podcasts can also be found on our website, 234audio.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. This episode of The Backstory was produced by Anthonieta Kalunta, John Iwodi, Nabilah Usman, Dominic Tabakaji, and Sam Tabakaji. Executive producer Rahmat Muhammad. Special thanks to Rabia Hadejia and Malaiwa Gbado Ikaleku. If you are interested in sponsoring this program, reach out to us at 0818-230-1234 or email us at info@234audio.com. I'm Rahmat Muhammad. See you next week.